Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to crack open the playbook, the one that shows you how to turn a giant mess of raw data into something, well, powerful, something that can actually change the game. So let's dive right in.
This is the question, right? How do businesses actually take these mountains of data and turn them into smart decisions? We hear the term big data thrown around all the time, but what does that really mean? And, how do you even start to tackle it without just drowning?
Okay, so think about it. For the longest time, data was pretty straightforward. Nice, neat spreadsheets, everything in its place. But that's just not the world we live in anymore. Now we're dealing with big data, it's messy, it's unstructured, and it's growing like crazy. To give you an idea of the scale we're talking about, the New York Stock Exchange, they generate about 1 terabyte of new data every single day. That's just mind-boggling.
And to get a handle on this, people usually talk about the 3 V's. First, you've got volume. That's just the sheer amount of data. Then there's velocity, how incredibly fast it's all coming at us. And finally, variety. We're not just talking numbers anymore. Nope, we're talking text, images, videos, you name it. So when you're facing this ocean of data, you can't just dive in without a map. You need a plan, right? A guide that takes you from that first question all the way to a real answer. And that map, that's what we call the data analytics lifecycle.
All right, so here's our plan. First, we'll look at the roadmap itself. Then we'll break down the first 3 phases, the foundation. After that, we'll get into the last 3 phases where the real value gets delivered. And we'll finish with maybe the most important part, why this whole thing is a loop, not a straight line.
Okay, let's unfold that map. The life cycle is really just the set of best practices that guides a project from the very beginning to the very end. And here it is, our 6-phase journey. You can see it starts with discovery, then we get into data preparation. From there, it's model planning and model building. And to finish it off, we have communicate results and operationalize. Looks like a lot, but don't worry, we're going to break down every single one.
Right, let's talk about these first 3 phases. Think of these as building the foundation of a house. It's absolutely crucial. If you mess this part up or try to rush it, believe me, the whole project is going to come tumbling down. So phase 1, discovery. This is square one, and what's so important to get here is that this phase isn't actually about the data at all. It's about the problem, the business problem. What are we even trying to figure out? You might form a hypothesis, a testable idea, something like, hey, we think customers who buy product A are way more likely to also grab product B. This whole phase is about setting up those smart, educated guesses.
Okay, next up, phase 2, data prep. And I gotta be honest with you, this is often the beast of the entire project. Seriously, some people say this step can eat up like 80% of your time. It's all the nitty-gritty murk of cleaning up that messy, raw data inside something called an analytics sandbox. And that's just a fancy term for a safe play area where you can poke and prod the data without any fear of messing up the real live systems.
A big part of this is a process called ELT. That's extract, load, and transform. I love the cooking analogy for this. It's like you extract your ingredients from the pantry, those are your data sources. Then you load them all onto your kitchen counter, that's your sandbox. And finally, you transform them, chopping, dicing, mixing everything up to get it ready for the actual recipe, which is our analysis.
So once our data is clean and prepped, we're ready for phase 3, model planning. This is where the fun starts. The team starts digging in, looking for relationships. Hey, is there a link between a customer's age and the kinds of things they buy? The whole point here is to figure out which variables matter and which analytical models or techniques are the right tools for the job. It's basically the architectural blueprint for our analysis.
Okay, foundation's built, it's solid. Now we get to move on to the second half of the cycle. This is where all that hard prep work starts to pay off, and we can create some real, tangible value.
And that brings us to phase 4, model building. This is where the blueprint becomes reality. The team actually builds the models they planned. And a really critical step here is splitting the data. Think of it like this. They use one chunk of data to train the model, to teach it what patterns to look for. Then they use a completely different chunk to test it. This makes sure the model actually learned the rules and didn't just, memorize the answers from the training data.
And just so you know, there are tons of different tools you can use for this part. You've got the big commercial software, things like MATLAB, but then you've also got amazing open source tools, like the programming language R. They're totally free and they're backed by these huge communities of people all over the world who are constantly improving them. All right, this next step might be one of the most overlooked, but it's so important. Phase 5, communicate results. Because let's be real, a brilliant insight is completely useless if nobody understands it or what to do with it. This is where the team asks, did we succeed? But even more importantly, how do we explain what we found and how much is this actually worth to the business? And this quote just nails it. The best data analysts, they're not just crunching numbers, they are storytellers. They have to weave a narrative that tells people what they discovered, explains why it's a big deal, and lays out a clear path for what the business should do about it.
And that brings us to the finish line. Or is it? Phase 6, operationalize. This is the moment of truth, where the analysis leaves the lab and goes out into the real world. The team hands over the final reports and the code, but, and this is key, they don't just hit a big red button and launch it everywhere. Usually, they start with a pilot project. It's like a small-scale test run in a real environment, just to make sure all the kinks are worked out before going big.
So there we have it. We've gone through all 6 phases from a simple idea all the way to a working model in the real world. But hang on, there is one more idea, one last concept that is probably the most important secret to success in this whole field.
So you deliver the report, the pilot went great, project's over, right? Time to pack up and move on to the next thing?
Well, not quite. And this is the big reveal. The most powerful thing about this whole life cycle is that it's not a straight line with a finish. It's a loop. The magic word here is iteration.
So why does that matter so much? Because what you learn at the end of one cycle, those findings almost always spark the new questions that kick off the next cycle. It allows you to constantly refine and get better. It turns a simple one-time project into this powerful, ongoing engine for learning and creating value.
So that's the roadmap, the 6 phases that help you turn a sea of data into real, actionable decisions. Now that you know the framework, the real question I have for you is, what big, messy, complicated questions could a process like this help you answer?